In this video, I'm going to be going over 5 reasons why you might not be able to call yourself an intermediate guitar player yet. Hey there, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andrew Clark, and today we're going to be finding out if you can really call yourself an intermediate guitar player. Now, funny enough, number 5 on this list actually took me over 10 years of playing to figure out on my own. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video because chances are you don't know it yet. Okay, so reason number 1 is you do not have a good sense of rhythm. A good sense of rhythm really sets apart a beginner from an intermediate guitar player. Now, while there are some exceptions, music is a pretty collaborative sport. So if you're playing with other musicians and you're the one out of time, things aren't going to sound so good. Here are 2 quick things that you can be working on to improve your sense of rhythm. The first tip is to relax your strumming hand. So you should have your shoulder relaxed, your elbow relaxed, everything through this arm should be relaxed. I like to imagine that I just wash my hands and I'm trying to shake the water off them, right? Like this. It should look like this. And on the guitar, so you can see my wrist is very loose. And a lot of the movement is coming from my elbow. And then the second tip is to use a metronome. Now, I find playing along to a metronome to be very boring. So a good way to combat this is when you are learning a song or working on a song, try and get yourself to a point where you can play along with the original recording. And something I used to do when I was first developing my timing and I couldn't figure out songs very quickly, I would sit down with my guitar and a song I really liked, and I would mute all the strings like this, and I would play along to the song with just my strumming hand like this. And while eventually you're going to want to learn the chords or the parts to whatever song you're playing along to, this is a great way to start working on your rhythm while also doing something that's kind of fun. You can almost imagine yourself as the drummer, so listen to the drums of the song, listen to the rhythm of the song, and just try and follow along with what that drummer or percussionist is doing. Okay, so number 2 is that your chord changes sound clumsy. Now, this can come from a few different things. It might be that your chording technique is not great. It might just be that you haven't built up the muscle memory yet to switch quickly between those chords. And it's also possible that you haven't quite synced up your strumming hand with your fretting hand yet. Now, a lot of these issues with chord changes come down to just repetition and practice, but there are a few things that you can do to make sure that they're sounding good. So first up, when you're making your chord, make sure that that chord sounds pretty flawless before you start trying to combine it with other chords and change between it. So if, let's say, your open C chord sounds like this, there's absolutely no reason why you should be working on transitioning from that chord or to that chord. So as always, make sure that your fingers are coming directly down, and I like to always pick through my strings to make sure everything is coming out nice and clearly. You want to make sure that your elbow hangs kind of naturally, not in too tight like this, not too far out, but just kind of nice and natural like that. If you do have it too far out or too far in, you're going to run into some problems. And you should make sure that you're pushing hard enough to make the notes come through, but not so hard that it's causing a bunch of tension in your arm and in your wrist. When it comes to bar chords and changing between bar chords, this is something that it's just like a muscle that you're going to go to the gym and work out with because it does require a decent amount of finger strength. So just make sure that every single day you're putting in the time to practice your bar chords. But one thing you can do is you can kind of try working on adjusting the bar part of your bar chord, because if you roll it back a little bit to the harder part of your finger, rather than it being flat on the fretboard in your chord like this, you kind of turn it to its side, you'll actually have a flatter surface and you won't have to push quite as hard to get it to fret all the strings. And there's actually some natural gaps in your fingers that you want to avoid, right? The creases there. So this helps make sure that they don't affect it so much. So from here, and I just tilt it back a little bit like this. When it comes to changing between the chords, it's important to visualize the next chord that's coming along. You can imagine the shape in your head as it's coming and kind of prepare your mind and your fingers for that change. And sometimes if a song has a lot of challenging chord transitions, you might want to isolate one transition. So something like a C major to a G major is a pretty tough transition. So maybe you just want to take some time to just practice going from C to G, from C to G, until that muscle memory is built up. One of my favorite exercises for learning a new chord shape is to actually make your chord shape like this on your fretboard, and then to take it off, and I smack my leg like this, basically to reset the hand, and then bring it back up and put it right back down. take it off, smack the leg, bring it up, put it back down. And you can do the same with the other one you're transitioning to. So smack the leg and then up to the G, down, back to the G. And this just helps you to build muscle memory. So your hand will start to remember the shape and the exact spacing of the strings. So when you go to transition to that shape, it becomes a lot more natural. Okay, reason number 3, you cannot play any songs flawlessly. There are literally hundreds of songs out there that are very easy to play on the guitar. A few good artists to look into are like Tom Petty or CCR, or even something more modern like Ed Sheeran. They all have songs that aren't going to challenge you too much, and a beginner should be able to play them without making a single mistake. And it's not even just about avoiding mistakes, it should sound almost identical to the recording. All right, reason number 4 is you don't know the notes on the fretboard. Now, I'm not talking about having every single note on every single string memorized, because that's going to take you a lot of time, and honestly it's probably not going to be the most useful or fun thing for you to be doing at this point in your guitar learning journey, but you should be able to identify every note even if it takes a little bit of time. So I do have an existing lesson on this, but something that you should try and do is memorize the low E and A strings and then learn something called octave centers that allow you to use that shape. So for example, if I find a G here, I know that an octave of that G is here. So even though I didn't memorize my D string, I know because of that shape that this is also a G. And you can do that all over the fretboard using that shape. Like I said, I did a whole lesson on it, so I'll make sure to link to that in the description below if you want to check it out. And finally, number 5 is you don't know the relationship between scales and chords. When I was growing up and learning how to play guitar, I was one of those guys who would say, oh, you know, Jimi Hendrix didn't know music theory, so I don't need to learn any music theory. I'm just gonna play by reading tabs or learning from a YouTube video. But understanding how scales and chords relate to each other will completely transform your trajectory on the guitar. If you want to be able to write songs, you need to know why some chords sound good together and why some don't sound good together. If you want to improvise, you need to know how a scale works over top of a chord progression. If you want to play in a band with other musicians who don't play the same instrument as you, you need a way to communicate your ideas with them. And if you want to know how a particular guitar player came up with a certain idea or how to steal that idea and use it for yourself in your own playing, then you need to know exactly what they're thinking, and chords and scales and a little bit of music theory is how you figure that out. So all I'm saying is you don't need to go out and learn a ton of theory. There's a lot of theory that's probably not going to be that useful for you in your guitar playing journey, but please do not make the same mistake I did and avoid learning the relationship between chords and scales. I'll make sure to link to some good videos below as well to help you get started with some of this stuff. And that's all I've got for you. If you can confidently say that you can do all 5 of these things, then I'd say it's fair to call yourself an intermediate guitar player. Now, depending on what genres you play and what your goals are on the guitar, there might be some other things in there as well that you need to know before you can call yourself an intermediate. But to me, in my years of teaching, these are the 5 biggest things that I've come across. So I'd like to hear from you. What are some other things that beginner guitar players should probably know before they can call themselves an intermediate? Leave your answers in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, it would mean a lot to me if you would give the video a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this, please make sure you subscribe to the channel because I release a new guitar video every single week. With all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.